All right, right now that the Supreme Court, I should say, overturned Roe v. Wade, which was sort of enshrined in a law, we were told, and unenshrinable for the better part of 50 years. So I wondered when the court did overturn it by a 6-3 vote, what Antonin Scalia would have made of that, the late Supreme Court justice. Fortunately, his fine son, Christopher Scalia, a great writer in his own right, joins us right now, co-editor of Scalia Speaks, Reflections on Law, Faith, and Life. A life well lived, and faith lessons from an American believer. Chris, great to have you. I was thinking a lot of your dad, I'm sure as you were, when this decision was announced. What do you think he'd say?
Thanks for having me on, Neil. I think he would be very proud, very happy, and very gratified. A lot of, it wasn't just Dobbs, but a number of opinions over the course of the last week basically confirmed or kind of re-endorsed some of the ideas and dissents that my father had written over the course of his career. So Dobbs, for example, in overturning Roe, built on some of the ideas that my father wrote in a number of cases, but especially Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1992. And that's a case that Justice Alito's majority opinion cites a number of times. So he would have been very gratified by that. But there was also a gun rights case that built on his majority decision from a 2008 case. And there were a couple of religious liberty cases, of free expression cases, that also built on some of my father's ideas. So, there was a New York Times headline a few years ago that was something along the lines of Scalia's fading legacy. That wasn't true then, and it's certainly not true now. So I'm very, very proud of him. I wish he were here to have seen it, of course, but I think he would have been very gratified and also impressed by and very proud of the wise and courageous justices who saw these opinions through.
Would he have ever envisioned when the Alito's draft got out, Chris, the marches and the protests and even the threats on Justice Kavanaugh's life because of that draft?
I think, obviously, the threat to Justice Kavanaugh's life, I think that certainly would have surprised my father. The protests, I don't think would have been as much of a surprise. One of the things he pointed out in his Planned Parenthood v. Casey dissent was that as long as justices basically usurp the rights of the people to vote on important moral issues like abortion, then the people will treat the Supreme Court as if it were the legislature it was acting like. Now, the extent of the protest, maybe that would have surprised him, but in the basics of the protest, I don't think would have. I think what would have surprised him even more was the leak itself. I think that would have astounded him. My father knew that sometimes clerks talk to reporters, but leaking a draft of an opinion just showed such disrespect for the integrity of the court and for the justices themselves. That would have been unconscionable.
Yeah, I think of how your dad would have hunted that person down. But yeah. I could be taking a leap here. Chris, much has been said that your father agreed maybe with the Samuel Alito's position that the Supreme Court should have never weighed in on this issue in the first place in 1973, and that this should be put in the hands of the American people or elected representatives. Now, the liberals have come out to say, well, we're going to have half the country that will allow abortions and half that won't. So is this really a simpler or a freer system? What do you say? What do you think your dad would say?
Well, democracy isn't supposed to be always neat and simple, and there are some really difficult issues that make for, kind of chaotic votes and a lack of continuity. But the important thing is that voters are making these decisions rather than judges making the decisions. Obviously, there are some decisions and some policies that voters should not weigh in on, and those are enshrined in the Constitution. Abortion isn't one of those. So yes, we will have various laws according to the beliefs, morals, and principles of people in various states. That's really how it should be. What's interesting to me is that a lot of the people who are upset over this decision are also the people who complain about our democracy being on the brink and being threatened and everything like that. This is a case where we're becoming more democratic, and they don't like that.
So finally, this notion that be careful what you wish for, because now abortion had gotten so sophisticated you can take these pills to handle the whole thing. And in these states that have these anti-abortion law triggers, they're weighing just what to do about those pills and interstate commerce and tracking who gets what and who is prescribed what. Would your father have envisioned that, and how would he have handled that?
I am not sure about that. I mean, I think you did identify it as kind of an interstate commerce issue, and I think that in some of these issues where these abortion policies and birth control policies go, I think a lot of it will be about different issues than what we had in Dobbs, and more about interstate commerce. For example, let's say that the Senate and Congress vote on a federal bill making abortion legal throughout the United States. That would come under scrutiny for interstate commerce, and I do not know what my father, how he would have voted on that, or how the conservative justices currently on the court would have. But it would be a different set of questions.
And it would be eloquently written, whatever that decision was.
Yeah.
Christopher Scalia, thank you so much. Good seeing you again.
Great seeing you, Neil. Thank you.